Reading, sorry. Our reading today is from Joshua 1:7-9. Be strong and very courageous. Be careful to obey all the law my servant Moses gave you. Do not turn from it to the right or to the left, that you may be successful wherever you go. Keep this book of the law always on your lips. Meditate on it day and night, so that you may be careful to do everything written in it. Then you will be prosperous and successful. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. Amen.
Good morning. It's lovely to be here with you this morning. As I walked into the church, my phone was reminding me that I came here exactly 4 years ago. Google tends to kind of keep an eye on us, doesn't it? So it's been a long time since I've been here, but it's lovely to be back here and see so many familiar faces, and thank you for the warm welcome. This morning, I just want to talk to you about something personal, something that is makes me taken, it shapes who I am as we walk with Jesus. But have you ever experienced a time where God seems to be blessing your every move, and then suddenly you're getting attacked from every corner? Do you have those experiences in your life? And now I, as growing up in Lebanon and living here in this country now over 30 years now, I've experienced that experience on a regular basis where you are attacked spiritually. And I'm sure that applies to you and to a lot of people that we know who are walking in their Christian life. Now, there are certain aspects of our life that the devil tends to attack the most. There are certain aspects, attributes, where he strategizes and plans, and he attacks in areas in many of our life, but in particular, this part of our world, this part of our life. And it's a very important ingredient. It's an ingredient that I feel is necessary if you're going to become everything that God has intended you to be. If you're going to become everything that God has called you to be, you need this particular attribute, and that is being courageous for God. Now, if you ever looked out to somebody as you're growing up, at somebody you thought was a fantastic Christian, they would have had those particular attributes, being courageous for God. Now, some of you would know that I grew up in Lebanon, where David first went to an orphanage in Beirut. I grew up in Lebanon during the Civil War, and I was living in an orphanage. And while that experience wasn't pleasant, it wasn't the most loving environment, I always had confidence in myself. I was always the kid that was cheeky, the child that always challenged authority. I was the child that would ask the questions annoyingly. I became the voice to the boys in the orphanage whenever they had a concern to raise. I was quite an annoying child. And then something happened to me when about 12 years old. There was a boy that arrived at the home. He could not walk, he couldn't talk. He was 6 years old, but he was more like a 1-year-old in development stage. He couldn't do much. He would wet the bed in our room, and this lady that was looking after her was very, very violent. She was abusive, and she would hit him on a regular basis. And one day, I had the job to give him a shower, and his body was blue, completely blue. She'd been up so much of this child that we knew we had to act, but I was too scared to raise concern about this lady. So back then, my sponsor, who's standing here, David, he sent me some money for Christmas. It was $10. It's quite a lot of money in those days. Now, I went and got myself one of these cameras. Do you remember these cameras that had like kind of side action on the side? Kind of time you have to develop those films. I mean, it's a bit weird now, isn't it? So I got this camera for $10, but I didn't have any money to buy a film. So I had to wait 3 more weeks till my mum came to give me that pocket money. And in that 3 weeks, this boy was getting beaten up on a regular basis. Now, in the end, I bought this film, I took pictures of his body, and I went to speak to the shop, the producer, the film developer. And I explained the situation. I said, on these pictures, there's evidence that there's abuse happening in the orphanage. Can you help me to produce the pictures? And I'll pay you back in 4 weeks' time, because I didn't have any more money. So he went into his red room and closed the room, and then he came out and he was crying. He was very upset and shaken by what he saw. This great guy, he helped me write this report. He gave me an envelope, and we put the pictures, and then I submitted this report into the office at midnight. I covered all my tracks to make sure no one knew who I was. That lady in the end was sacked, but somehow the parents in the orphanage found out it was me. I'm not sure how people started talking, and I became public enemy number 1. And they would start to abuse me. They would make fun of my heritage, my name, the way I spoke. And every element they would question every time I raised my voice. They would cut me down, and they would say that I did not have an opinion to share. And things got so bad at the orphanage, and all the way till I was 14, and then all the way to England. Things got so bad that all the way to university, I suffered from the worst form of stuttering. I couldn't talk. There was such an extreme abuse going at me. And as I look back, it became quite apparent that those house parents were used by the devil to really, in many ways, to strip me of my courage, to take away my voice, the very thing I was called for. And for years and years, for over 10 years, I didn't have a voice. It strangles. Anybody experienced that will understand what I'm saying. Now, I remember after university, I went to work in London for a bank. And I got a good job. I was working for IT security in the city. And the first time I walked into the building, the lady was on receptionist. She called in sick for 3 weeks. And I'm a junior person, right? So I get put in at reception. And it was an awful experience. I was receiving phone calls about IT breaches into the department. And every phone call would come and have to write everything down in shorthand and trying to work out who the best person to contact. And people were getting quite aggressive and annoyed. There was a breach and they wanted fixing. And with every call, some days about 140 calls would come to that department. With every call, my voice would not come out. And every time my voice stopped stuttering, I panicked, and things got worse and worse and worse. Now, I remember walking in London to work. We're working across the river in London, and I would pray on the way to work that God would give me back my voice. Sometimes I'll walk around the block several times to get the courage to go in. It was just an awful experience, but then I started to experience God, that David was talking about peace. It was like God was asking me, Ahmed, who did I call? It's like he was reminding me about the times that I spoke and gave me that voice to challenge injustice. And God started to use people to speak into my life with kindness and love. And they would remind me of the time, and they would talk to me about what God had called me to do. And they would remind me of His purpose of my life. But sometimes it's not what other people say about you. Sometimes it's not even what God says about you. It's all about what you believe God says about you. That's the essential part. It doesn't matter what people say. God can tell you all day long that He's called you. But until you believe that He's called you, the devil will try to destroy that belief. The devil's after our courage. in what God says about us. That's essential, isn't it? He's after these doubts. And it's very clear. The first thing in the Bible we see, don't we? He's speaking to Eve, and the first thing he says, did God really say that? Isn't it amazing, isn't it? The first thing he says in that concept. See, because the devil wants you to disbelieve, to have unbelief in the area that God has called you. And as I was struggling at that time in London, this verse came to me, and it's incredible. It's how God uses these things. You can read the Bible all the time, but all of a sudden you see something that you've never seen before. It's amazing, isn't it? And I was reading the story of Elisha. And in that story, one of the soldiers drops his axe. They're ready for battle. He drops the axe in the water. Do you know that story? And it disappears in the water. And then he goes to Elisha and he says, that's what happened. Elisha doesn't go around and says, how stupid is that? How can he lose us? A tank. It's a tank in a way, isn't it? Think about Iron Age. It's got an important axe. But Elijah says, where did he lose it? He shows him. And Elijah drops the stick in the water. And amazingly, the axe resurfaces. And it was like God was talking to me back then. It was like he was saying to me, Ahmed, where did you lose your courage? Go back to where you lost it, throw my name at it, and let it resurface. It's amazing how God brings these things to us, isn't it? That year after that experience, I stopped stuttering. And at the bank, I was doing very well. I was doing exceptionally well, but I felt God was saying to me, it's time to give that up, very much like David did. So on the Friday, I gave up my job in London, doing very well, and I started to work in David's shed in Essex. It's a bit of a bizarre experience, that is. It's quite not the best career move in the time. But what I found is, in the reality, as we think about these things, what David's talking about earlier in the service, and this is what I've learned, is that our greatest destiny is often on the other side of our fear. That's the kind of thing. It stops us from getting there, isn't it? On the other side of our fear is our purpose waiting for us. That's what God is saying to us this morning. And the verses, when we heard this morning from Joshua, it says, have I not commanded you to be strong and to be of good courage? Don't be afraid, nor be dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. Here we have in that story, Joshua is taken over from Moses. He's been with him the whole time. What a great manager, isn't it, to learn from? Outstanding work experience for learning from the big man. He's seen everything, but still he has doubt. He doesn't feel qualified for the job. He doesn't feel strong in himself. And here we see God, really, that if you read that chapter, it's like God giving him a pep talk, isn't he? Snap out of it. Be courageous. Have I not told you? He tells him 7 times to be courageous. And we think about these heroes in the Bible, we think incredible. But they're ordinary people who are struggling with their faith. Now, I don't know what you guys are going through this morning, what demons you are fighting, what challenges you are seeing, but I feel like God is saying this morning to you and me, have I not commanded you to be strong? Have I not told you to be courageous? That's an important element, isn't it? Because I feel like as we go through our life with Jesus, we are going to be facing challenges that are bigger than us. There are difficulties with our families, with our health, with our finances and relationships. These are challenging moments. And all these things will attempt to bully us into a corner, to stop us from hearing what God is asking us to do, from being close to God. When I was growing up in the orphanage, my favorite story was of a young shepherd boy. And we hear that story, don't we? The famous story of David. And it's incredible. I look at him and I'm thinking, on his first day on the job, I think 14, maybe, I can't remember. On his first day of a job, this is what he faces. He is facing a giant. He's outsized, outskilled, outmatched. But David says, I come to you in the name of the Lord. You know, he didn't just use we focus about the stone, don't we? It's a great achievement. But he says, I come to you in the name of the Lord. He didn't throw a stone. He threw the name of God at him. And I think God's going to call us to do some things that seem to be impossible. They seem to be beyond our reach. But we will need to have courage to trust in him. And that is the challenge at Stand By Me. That's the challenge that we face on a regular basis. You know, I inherited David, the work from an incredible leader, visionary, went to places where we thought it's impossible to go there, and yet, here we are, we're looking after 4,000 kids, and today, it's a scary time. I have no idea how God's going to provide. We're on a roller coaster. I couldn't tell you how we can plan for 40% increase in inflation overseas. We just don't know how to do it. But we keep trusting that God is going to meet the needs. We keep reflecting on what David says, those 27 years of extraordinary journey where God has taken us to places and situations where no one wants to go, to rescue kids from terrible circumstances. Now, it's scary because we know people are suffering here. We know that needs of others are very important here too. And we don't know how we're going to meet the needs overseas. But yet, God is saying to us to be courageous and to be bold, especially in places like Ethiopia. This is the town of Bokaji, and I'm so pleased that some of you are going to see Bokaji in person. On the surface, it sounds like a lovely place, a typical African town, lots of hustle and bustle. But as you get closer to the reality of life for children and for people who are living in poverty is extreme. And I remember going to Ethiopia. Some of you guys would see these pictures for the first time in 2005. I went on a bus. I didn't know where the bus was going. My translator said 180 kilometers. I thought 4 hours we'd be there. 12 hours later, we're still on this bus. And by the time I got there, there's a church that are waiting. And they wanted to show me this school that we're working in, where they're working in. They wanted to show me their situations. And there was 180 kids in one class and another 100 in another class. They've raised something like £60 a month. That was what they were doing. £60 a month is what they raised to run this school in Bokaji. It wasn't really a school. It was more, it was more like sardine cans. It was awful. And the conditions in that town were even worse. This is a council house. It's costing something like 20p a month, and the lady could not pay it. A 6-foot by 6-foot house, what those guys who've been will understand, accommodating 6 people. There's a bed and chair in there on the floor, and that was it. And what's incredible about it is that there was hardly any taps. Now, I remember going to Bokaji for the first time, and then the whole town had only 6 taps. How many taps do we have in our house? Anybody counted this morning? Who counted taps this morning? Anybody cares about taps? You don't think about taps, do we? We assume they're there, don't we? But 6 taps is what they had in Bokaji as a public. And the children will have to wait, and particularly girls will have to wait for 6-7 hours. What happens if you're waiting? You're not going to school. So girls in particular were in desperate situations. But yet, they took me to this amazing empty field in Bokaji. And the leaders were saying, we have this piece of land, will you build us a school? And the reality was like, no way. We can't build you a school. We came back and we started talking, and people like Chris and Fee came on board. And there's doctors and nurses and people that came to paint and to give kids cuddles, and people that came over, and then they gave food parcels. They made beds, bought shoes, They came and taught our kids. It's incredible. Today we have over 560 kids in that school. And as a result of people coming together. You know, the first time I went to Bokaji, it was tough because I was trying to walk around in town and every kid wanted to hold your hand. They want to hold your hand. And the only way we can do it was to actually have a child on each finger. But still only had 10 kids. Can you imagine it? Trying to walk around. And every team that came after that, every member that came on the team brought 10 more fingers. That's what we're doing at Stand By Me. We're just trying to bring fingers to the situation. It's not easy, but God's blessing in that situation. And kids are growing in faith and growing in confidence. Happy kids to come to school for the first time. But the challenge for Ethiopia is still very hard in many ways, and in particular for girls. I want to share this film, if I can, this morning, about the situation for our girls in particular as they are leaving our project and going to high school.
Hi, ስሜ ምረት አስቻለው እባላለሁ። የምኖረው ኢትዮጵያ ነው። የምማረው 9ኛ ክላስ ነው። እድሜ 15 ነው። ስታንድ ባይ ሚ የገባሁት 2012 ነው። የገባሁበት ምክንያት እናቴ ደሃ ስለሆነችና አቅም ስለሌላት ነው። ስታንድ ባይ ሚ ከሌሎች ትምህርት ቤት የሚለይበት ምክንያት አንደኛ ምግብ ያበሉናል እና ለትምህርት የሚሆነን ቁሳቁሶች ይሰጡናል። ከዚህ የበለጠ ደግሞ እናትና አባቶቻችን የማያደርጉልንን እነሱ ያደርጉልናል። ከዚህ የበለጠ ደግሞ ይንከባከቡናል እና ፍቅር ይሰጡናል። ትምህርቴን በጣም ነው የምወደው፣ ግን ትምህርቴ በመውደዴ ብዙ ችግር ውስጥ ነው ያለሁት። ከእናትና ከእንጀራ አባቴ ጋር ነበር የምኖረው፣ ግን ከእናትና ከእንጀራ አባቴ ጋር በምኖርበት ሰዓት እናትና አባቴ በሚጨቃጨቁበት ሰዓት በእኔ ምክንያት ነው የሚጨቃጨቁት እና በዚህ ምክንያት በእኔ በሚጨቃጨቁበት ሰዓት ከቤት አባሩ ብቻዬን በመውጣት ችያለሁ። በዚህም ላይ ደግሞ በትምህርቴ ላይ ጫና አምጥቶብኛል። አንደኛ ልብስ ማጠብ አለ፣ ምግብ ማብሰል አለ። መቼ ነው ምግብ ማብሰል? ምን አብስዬ ራሱ መቼ ነው በልቼ የምሄደው? ስታንድ ባይ ሚ ብዙ ነገር ነው እያደረገልኝ ያለው። ቁርስ፣ ምሳ እና ያለብሱኛል እና በየወሩ የቤት ኪራይም ይከፍሉልኛል። እና ይሄ ባንኖር ደግሞ አንደኛ የሰው ቤት ነው ተቀጥሬ የምኖረው። እኔ የምኖር አልመስለኝም፣ ምክንያቱም እኔ ብዙ ነገር ነው እያጋጠመኝ ያለው። ለዛ በስታንድ ባይ ሚ ገዛ 8ኛ ክላስ ያለፈው ዓመት ልፈተን ችያለሁ። ምክንያቱም ብዙ ትልቅ ነጥብ አመጣለሁ ብዬ ተስፋ አድርጌ ነበር። ምክንያቱም አስተማሪዎቹና የስታንድ ባይ ሚ አስተማሪዎች ጥሩ አስተማሪና ጎበዝ አስተማሪዎች ነበሩ። ተፈትኜ ነጥቡን ሳይ ደግሞ 68.55 ነው ያመጣሁት። ነጥቤን በማየቴ ደግሞ በጣም ደስ ያለኝ፣ ምክንያቱም ሃይስኩል ለመግባት ጉጉቱና ፍላጎቱ ስለነበረኝ። ሃይስኩል ሲሄድ ግን በጣም ነው የወረደብኝ። አንደኛ የልጆች መብዛት፣ የክላሱ ንጽህና፣ የላይብረሪ መጨናነቅ፣ የላይብረሪ ልጆች መብዛት። ሃይስኩል ላይ ወንዶችና ሴቶችን እኩል አያዩ። ምክንያቱም ወንዶችን ወደ ራሳቸው ያመጣሉ፣ ይደግፋቸዋል እና ያበረታቷቸዋል። ሴቶችን ግን የትም አትደርሱ፣ አይሳካላችሁ ብሎ ይናገሩናል። ሴቶችን ግን ላልተፈለገ ነገር ነው የሚፈልጓቸው። ምክንያቱም እኛም ያንን ነገር ስለምናውቅ አንቀርባቸው። ስኩል ሴንተሮች ከሚያልቅ በጣም ቾክያለሁ። ምክንያቱም አይዞሽ፣ በርቺ፣ ጎበዝ የሚሉ ሰዎች በዙሪያዬ ስላሉ። ሲቀጥል ደግሞ አስተማሪዎቹ ጎበዝ አስተማሪዎች ስለሆኑ በስራ ስለሚያስተምሩ ቲቶሪያልም ስለሚቀርቡ ሳድግ ኢንጂነር ነው መሆን የምፈልገው። ምክንያቱም አሁን ያለሁበትን ህይወት ማስታወስም ሆነ መናገርም አልፈልግም። ምክንያቱም አሁን ያለሁበት ችግር መራብ፣ መጠማት፣ ብቸኝነት ነው እና በዚህ ችግር ያለውትን ሰዎች መርዳትና መደገፍ ነው የምፈልገው።
She's incredible, isn't she, in that sense? You know, what I loved about that film, watching it, is that she had to get in 68.55%. It's very important, isn't it? You know, most girls in Ethiopia do not finish grade 3. Most of our parents can't read and write. So the fact that girls are trying to achieve this, when I first went, girls didn't come to school. A lot of them would end up with early marriage or working at the home. That's what they do. Girls tend to be the ones who pick up sticks to firewood and help with the chores and getting water. So it's an incredible experience for us to help these girls to achieve better things. And a challenge for us as in that school, in that environment, is that many girls don't feel able to ask questions because there's too many sexual abuse happening in that environment. It's a tough place, isn't it, to be? So she is tremendously courageous, isn't she? So we feel on her behalf, we want to be courageous. We want to do the best thing for her. So last year, we started to build the high school center. Now, when we started, like every story at Stamp, we didn't have the money for it, but God provided. We have every penny for the high school, thanks to your generosity that helped us along the way. And this is the high school getting built in Bokaji at the moment. And that's the next phase coming up, and we pray and hope that by September next year, we will have 160 kids in that high school center. That would be a great achievement, wouldn't it, to achieve that? And that's what we're trying to build in Bokaji, because they deserve that. They deserve the best we can give them. But let me just finish on this slide. Every year in Bokaji and across Ethiopia, they do grade 8 exam. It's the equivalent of the GCSEs, just beyond that, a little bit. Maybe it's year 10 for us. It's a very important exam in Ethiopia. Without that, you can't go to further school. Without that, you can't go to college. And this year, across Ethiopia, only 40% of kids passed that exam. It's a very tough exam to pass. It's very tough. But yet in Bokaji, thanks to all the support of teachers and teams coming across over the years, we have a 100% pass rate. 100% pass rate. The country itself is 40%. Here we're working with some of the kids come from the worst families, the poorest places, and yet they are achieving their best grades. And here we have our top kids in the whole school. In the whole region, we have the first 5 kids, and they're all girls. And that's taken us 17 years of work to get there. And David will tell you, when I saw that message, that email, I cried, because I'm a dad of 2 girls. So it means a lot to us that these kids are coming. And here they are. The lowest mark that we had in Ethiopia, in our school in Bokaji, was 78%. And these girls all got above 90, with the highest result going to Miseret there in the second from the right. And it's incredible. When I look through all their stories one by one and how they came to us, how they started the project, and this is Miseret coming through. And when I read her story, their father left them when she was a young baby. She couldn't handle the poverty. The middle brother has a cerebral palsy, so he can't talk and walk. Extreme conditions. Her other 2 siblings were going to school, but she wasn't, because she was seen not worthy to go to school. She was not worth her going to school because she was too valuable to help the mum with the chores. And here she is. She's got the best mark, not just in our school, but the whole region. Is that incredible? And that's what we're doing at Stand By Me. That's what the own story all the time for Stand By Me. We want our kids to become the next police officers, teachers and doctors. And if you are moved by our share this morning, if you want to hear more about Stand By Me, if you're going to go on a team in the future, please take the opportunity. You can pray for us. You can be part of what we do. You can come and sponsor a child. There's some packs at the back. come and speak to me, or Faye, or my wife Mel, or Hannah's there, Matt in the corner. Come and speak to us. We can tell you a bit more about child sponsorship, and we can address some of your questions. Thank you. I've spoken a bit too long here, but I hope that's okay. God bless.